Well, greetings and shalom. Welcome to Hebrew Rooted, and I am Adrian Scott. It is time for some more Shekels for your thoughts. Now, the reason I'm sitting down and doing this one is my wife and I recently watched a video, and it kind of triggered me. I got very animated about it. It is something I'm quite passionate about, and I'm sitting there watching this, and we're having a conversation about it, and I'm like, I really want to turn this into a video and share it with others. So here we are. And basically, what the video was talking about was and I'm going to connect this to something I have discussed earlier. I'm thinking maybe of putting this even in my creation and evolution sort of playlist, or it kind of falls in that category a little bit. But what they were talking about was effectively carbon-14 and radiocarbon dating as a process, and how this is often used to prove or justify evolutionary concepts, when the reality would seem to be, from my perspective, and more importantly, you know what, I want to preface a little bit to say I really know nothing about this stuff. I am absolutely deferring to the people in these videos that do know something about this stuff, people that are degreed doctors and scientists and professors of geology and of these particular sciences that relate to that. And so this is a viewpoint from them, and I'm just kind of sharing it to you. So actually, by all means, I would encourage you to go check out their channel, subscribe. They have a lot of amazing stuff. I have watched many videos on that channel, and I find it very informative and inspiring. And the channel is called Is Genesis History? And it's a very poignant question they ask, and they look at a lot of evidences and ideas that support, with evidence and with science, the concept that the Bible is true and accurate. And in this particular case, with the carbon-14, this is one, I believe in that particular video, they were interviewing a gentleman by the name of Dr. Andrew Snelling. And actually, just to mention it real quick, this is a fella that I had first become acquainted with through another organization called Answers in Genesis, which is also a good one to look up. They've got some amazing stuff as well. But in this one, so they're talking about this. And now, before I get to the carbon-14 thing, I want to back up to a previous video. I kind of touched on this subject, which had to do with the location of a set of dinosaur fossils that have been found. But in this particular case, now, normally when dinosaur fossils are located, very often we're not talking about, complete skeletons, or even mostly complete skeletons. In a lot of cases, it may be 2, 3, half a dozen bones, and they just kind of have to reconstruct the rest around that. In this particular case, this was a mostly intact fossil that was found. I don't remember the exact number they put on it. For some reason, I'm thinking it was like 80% or something like that. But it was a mostly intact fossil. But the truly amazing thing was that this thing still had dried soft tissue on it, and I believe even dry blood cells. But the soft tissue is the main culprit, or the main discussion point here, because science, whether creationist or secular, basically agree on the idea that, backing up super quick, so dinosaurs were believed in the conventional evolutionary worldview to have existed, I believe it's like 40 to 60 million years ago. And so the point is that there's no known method to preserve soft tissue for 40 million plus years. That there's just no way that we're aware of that can be done. So the conclusion from a creationist standpoint is, well, maybe those bones aren't 40 million years old. The Bible indicates a record that the earth is around 6,000, or yeah, around 6,000 years old. Sorry, and that those bones therefore would be 6,000 years or less old. Therefore, it's no great shock or surprise from our standpoint that you would find soft tissue on that, because that is possible at that point. 40 million years plus, not so much. So the idea was this scientist, and I'm not discrediting her at all. And so when faced with this find, this was so earth-shaking because, again, this principle that there's no known method to preserve tissue for that period of time. And it really forces you, I mean, again, the conclusion I come to is, well, then maybe those bones aren't that old. Her solution, now this ties into a concept of worldview. See, the way everyone, whether you're a believer or not, the way they see the world affects how they understand things, how they're going to interpret things, and how they will explain things. Now, for a lot of people, and I was one of these, because again, for many years, I was a devout evolutionist. I very much believed that. It had all been proven, and the Bible was a book of fairy tales, really, from my perspective back then. Again, I don't believe that now, but I did, and I was pretty locked into that. So that's why I firmly believe that it was God himself that, in his wisdom, in his plan, for whatever reason, decided at that point to open my eyes to see stuff from a different perspective, because I was very locked into that viewpoint, such as this doctor is who found this fossil. And she comes to the conclusion, actually I should put it another way, the one thing she could not do based on her worldview was even entertain the idea, seemingly, that these bones could be less than 40 million years old, because it is a scientific fact, according to her, according to that worldview, that viewpoint, that those bones are that old. So she can't even seem to entertain the idea that those bones may not be that old, that maybe they're less than that. Instead, her conclusion has to be, and this was the conclusion she came up with, that, well, there must be some method of preserving soft tissue that long that we haven't discovered yet. Can't say that's utterly impossible, but it seems like a further stretch than, well, maybe those bones aren't that old. So I'm not going to get too much more into that, because I want to get back to the carbon-14 thing. And this was a little more generalized, but they had done some tests with this, and there was one in particular I'm going to reference. Again, it's in this video on the Is Genesis History channel. If you want to go check that out for yourself, I'm sure if you go on their channel, look for carbon-14, you'd find it. But so they're talking about all of this, and there is part of the science that we know about carbon-14 is that it can only exist for so long, and after enough period of time, it either goes away or becomes inert or inactive in some form and can't be measured anymore. And I believe the year that I heard them say it was about 90,000 maximum. Now that's an interesting one, because 90,000 years old, certainly, that doesn't fall in line with the concept of a young Earth being 6,000 years old, but it's actually closer to the number than 40 million plus. But anyway, so no older than that. So if you find something that you believe is older than 90,000 years, you shouldn't find any carbon-14 in it, or you shouldn't be able to measure any carbon-14 in it anyways. And we have a lot of things that we would say are older than that. Now, this is where it gets into one thing that they're talking about. But the idea with the dinosaur, for example, is, because they have done this as well, is you shouldn't find any carbon-14 in something that's 40 to 60 million years old, if it only has a measurable life of about 90,000 years. But, and this is another thing, so anything they find that they put in that kind of age should not be, you should not find any carbon-14 in it. Yet they find carbon-14 in everything that they're checking, everything. I mean, everything. I want to clarify that, everything. Now, that shouldn't be happening if half of these things are more than 90,000 years old, right? but they find it everywhere. And how do you get carbon-14 into stuff? Well, predominantly, I guess this is something that comes from some element of the sun and primarily goes into the plants and vegetation, which end up being a food source for a bunch of the animals, and then other animals consume those animals or the plants, and it gets into that, and that's kind of a trickle-down effect that way. So if you have something that's deeply buried under the surface and believed to have been there the whole time, again, you shouldn't find any carbon-14, but for elements that are believed to be from depths like that, they still do. But anyways, it really boils down to that 90,000 years. So the interesting thing that came up is then they talk about this concept of diamonds. Now, this is an interesting one because diamonds, first off, diamonds we know are, I believe, identified as the hardest substance that we're aware of on the planet. And so you shouldn't find carbon-14 in it because A, it's not a plant, it didn't filter it that way, and it's not an animal that consumed the plant. This is something that was buried in a coal seam. Now, these coal seams have widely different ages in the conventional secular view. The couple they mentioned, one coal seam they were talking about was about 300,000 years old. Another coal seam was closer to 1 billion years old in that viewpoint. But they find diamonds in all of these. Now, what was interesting here is they had this group took these diamonds, biblical creationist group, took diamond samples from various coal seams of various ages, all tremendous ages, and had them sent in for testing. Carbon-14 was found in all of them. This is a seam that's 300 million years old, was the youngest. I believe that was the youngest one they mentioned. 90,000 years for carbon-14 shouldn't be there, but it is. So that would seem to indicate that coal seam is 90,000 years old or younger. The billion-year-old, same thing. Carbon-14 was found in the diamonds. So they find it in all these multiple diamonds of vastly old coal seams. It shouldn't be there for a number of reasons, but it is. It's in all the samples that they found. And apparently, I believe the rate or the measurement of it was close to the same in all the samples. You'd think with decay and everything that there would be a lot less carbon-14 in something 1 billion years old as opposed to something 300 million years old. But the rates were all pretty close to the same. This is remarkable stuff, really. It shakes a lot of conventional ideas for certain. So they take this to a convention that was going on. I don't know if it was a convention of geologists, but it was a gathering of scientists, many of them, of course, secular. And they showed this presentation, and I don't know what came of it, but I mean, you'd think, everyone would be racing to embrace such remarkable news, but apparently they didn't. However, there was one secular scientist there, or group of scientists. I don't know if it was an individual or a group. But anyways, they found this very interesting. So they themselves went and got their own diamond samples from multiple places and did the same kind of tests and came up with the same results. So now we're doing this over and over again. Whether you're a secular scientist or a biblical scientist, I believe they're pretty much in agreement that carbon-14 has this lifespan of about 90,000 years, or no more than about 90,000 years. Yet these things are believed to be, these items, these diamonds in this case, are believed to be much, much older than that. Again, 300 million years, billion years, a lot more than 90,000. And they came up with the same results. These people find the same rate of carbon-14 in these diamonds from these vastly different ages, all at the same measurement, at the same rate. They all have carbon-14, which they shouldn't. And what's their conclusion? Wow, maybe these coal seams and these diamonds aren't as old as we thought they are. No, that's not their conclusion. Their conclusion is the machine was broken. Hello, you have multiple groups of people running tests on multiple items. All the machines are broken? All the test samples are faulty? How does that work? That seems to defy logic in my book, and that's what got me so animated. It's just like they can't even entertain the idea that the earth isn't that old. Why? Ultimately, in my opinion, because then you have to accept that there is a God. And as soon as you have to accept that there is a God, then you have to accept that he has certain rules and standards that we're supposed to be living by. And we don't want to, collectively as humanity, we don't want to do things God's way. We want to do it our way, which again is this concept of humanism, right? That's why I think humanism is one of the greatest enemies of humans, is humanism, in my opinion. But they're so set against even possibly considering that idea that they will embrace, in my opinion, absurdity rather than entertain the idea that there is a creator. He created this earth and it's 6,000 years old, roughly, right? Like they will go to almost any length rather than accept that. And you see this over and over again. So, I mean, again, hearkening back to my conversion from an evolutionist to a creationist, it wasn't so much that I was presented with, smoking gun evidence that creation is true, right? Here's the fact. This proves the Bible is true. This proves there is a God. That's not what any of the stuff that I discovered was about to me anyways. And I don't think it was the point of the people presenting it. It was more a point of, the stuff that they're saying, the evolutionists, is such a certainty, isn't such a certainty. There's a lot more unknowns and gray areas, and you see this theory of evolution where continually they have to fall back on when a certain dilemma or problem arises, such as dinosaur fossils with soft tissue, diamonds and everything having carbon-14 that are old enough that it shouldn't, all these kind of problems. Instead of making any other conclusion, they'll just make another theory to go on top of the theory. And then when that theory gets challenged, they'll make another theory to explain it. Then another theory, then another theory. And it just keeps going on and on and on. Funny enough, again, from my standpoint now as a biblical creationist, we don't have to come up with a million theories. Now, I mean, some people would argue, well, that's just because you're invoking the supernatural. I actually don't think there's a lot of supernatural to it. Sure, God, I guess you could define as a supernatural entity, but he's an omniscient entity, that's for sure. But I think that his act of creation was something that was rooted in being natural. And it's the evidence that we see all around the world. And it's stuff like the soft tissue and the diamonds and whatever else evidence there is. It's kind of funny. I watch all these archaeological things. Again, I know nothing about archaeology, but I just find it so fascinating. And they keep going out and finding more evidences that seem to support and prove the Bible. So I'm like, yeah, keep digging, keep going out there and doing stuff, because it's just validating our belief more and more. And my true hope, my true and sincere hope and prayer is that people will discover this, that the wool will be pulled from their eyes and they can see a bigger picture. They can at least entertain the idea that maybe there's this other possibility here, instead of being so rigidly locked into this viewpoint that there's just nowhere to go. There's no room for growth in that. It's so limiting in so many ways, not just about being a believer or a non-believer. And I just really, really would hope that eyes would be opened, hearts would be softened, and the message, the word of the living God, and the message that he brings through his Son, the Messiah, who is our Savior and Redeemer, would reach everyone, really, but would just reach people around the world. So I think I'll kind of wrap it up there. Again, I'm not a scientist. I just play one on YouTube. No, I'm not a scientist, and I don't really understand a lot of the nuts and bolts of how all these things work, but I'm taking the word of people that are vastly educated and experienced in this stuff. And sadly, I think sometimes what often happens is these people are often segregated and mocked simply because of their viewpoint. Anything that they've accomplished, any learning, any experience, any evidence, anything that they do is just dismissed. It's given no validity, not because it's not worth validity or examining at the very least, but as soon as, oh, you're a creationist, pfft, you got nothing to say. We're not interested in your opinion, and it just shut the door. It's that closed-mindedness. I think it's a tremendous enemy of humanity, being that closed-minded. And yeah, I'm not going to dwell on that too long. So I will wrap it up there. I ended up going a little bit longer on this than I thought I would, but there we go. It is something that I am extremely passionate about because of my own past. And I strive to learn more and understand more about this stuff. And I look for people like Dr. Andrew Snelling and Dr. Jason Lyle and all these other people that are looking at what has been put into one particular box from another viewpoint and saying, maybe it's bigger than that box. Maybe there's another way to look at this, So keep an open mind. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And that applies to evolution and creation. It applies to the Bible in general, and Christianity. Challenge it, right? Be a Berean. Search the scriptures. See if the things that you are hearing from other people, such as myself, have any foundation in truth or could be true, right? Just don't be afraid to grow, to think bigger, and to not be stuck in a box, right? On that, I'm going to say thanks for checking out the video. If you did enjoy it, please give it a thumbs up, share, this is always a big one for us, and subscribe to the channel, because the more of those things that happen, the more, frankly, the more it motivates me to do stuff like this, but also the better chance that it's going to cross someone else's feed. I think that's the term for it. So there's a better chance that other people will be introduced to this. And even if they don't like what I have to say about it, maybe this video would inspire them to go look at the Is Genesis History channel and get the information from them. But that all happens and is able to happen when you do like, share, and subscribe and comment on the videos. All of those things help the old YouTube algorithms. So with that, I will see you in the next video. I do wish blessings to all of you in the name of Yeshua our Messiah. And I say shalom and bye for now.